Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ for the 17th Sunday of Ordinary Time from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field, which a person finds and hides again, and out of joy goes and sells all that he has and buys that field." Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant searching for fine pearls. When he finds a pearl of great price, he goes and sells all that he has and buys it. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net thrown into the sea, which collects fish of every kind. When it is full, they haul it ashore and sit down to put what is good into buckets. What is bad, they throw away. Thus it will be at the end of the age. The angels will go out and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth. Do you understand all these things? They answered, "Yes." And Jesus replied, "Then every scribe who has been instructed in the kingdom of heaven is like the head of a household, who brings forth from his storeroom both the new and the old." The Gospel of the Lord. The transformation began when his BMW caught fire last fall. They were suddenly a one-car family. For the first time in 30 years, they were learning to negotiate who gets to use the remaining car, for how long, and on what justification. But it turned out that these two later-in-life adults, even if still employed, didn't need two vehicles. And as Kathleen Hirsch wrote in the Boston Globe recently, embracing a life with one car led to a change of perspective in other areas of their lives. She wrote, "The first thing that started to happen was that we felt better about ourselves, less dependent on one of the many energy-hogging machines in our life." Then Kathleen and her husband realized that a new frugality started seeping into other aspects of our existence. Fewer fancy hotel stays and taking on the weekly yard care themselves became the norm. Less online shopping. They got bikes for errands around town. They added vegetables and edible greens to their flower garden. In brief, Kathleen wrote, our life became more interesting. It has been humbling to acknowledge that we needed a catastrophic fire to goad us on this journey. Equally humbling to admit that our belated new habits will never affect decades of casual consumption and waste. We've acquired a new realism. Even the educated and well-intentioned, which, though many friends may disagree, we consider ourselves, respond more readily to floods, droughts, fire, and disaster than we do to educational campaigns and climate rhetoric. The most significant change in our life recently has been a new gratitude. What we'd once regarded merely as the blank canvas for our pleasures and convenience, we now sense as holy ground. We know that reverence alone won't save the earth, but ditching a car has taught us that it cannot be done without reverence. As Kathleen and her husband discover, the search for the gospel treasure and pearl begins with understanding the real value of what we are searching for and the investment of time and energy required. Wisdom is realizing the authentic and lasting good we possess and being able to let go of the useless and distracting. Jesus likens the kingdom of God to a man who finds buried treasure and sells all that he has so that he can buy the field containing the treasure. He likens the kingdom to a merchant who sells everything he has in order to be able to buy one really valuable pearl. What is the one really valuable pearl that we are willing to sacrifice everything in order to have? What is that buried treasure for which we would be willing to give up everything else? Isn't it possible that what we want most is perhaps something very selfish? Possessions, security, power, pleasure, comfort, a new Mercedes, an investment portfolio, an oil well, honor and praise and awards, kingship over everything we survey. What would the world be like if, instead of these, our one really valuable pearl was something like world peace, based on justice for all, or the development of a classless society based on respect for all people, or the priority of need over want, or the worship of God through prayer, service, and a preferential option for the poor? Or could it be no walls, all people's brothers and sisters, clean air, water, and food for everyone, neighbor serving neighbor, dinner with friends, a kind word, finding God in all things? Or to consider what selling all to buy the farm might mean today, ask yourself this. If the reign of God entails a consistent ethic of life, honoring the lives of the unborn, the unhoused, the enemy, the aging, the handicapped, the poor, the convicted, what residue of selfishness or vengeance do I need to let go of to fully embrace such an ethic? What would the world be like? Jesus says it would be like the kingdom of God. Not too long ago, Jesus' parable of the dragnet would immediately confront us with our consumerism, our obsession with having the biggest, the newest, the flashiest. But more and more of us have started to worry about not having something else: time. A few years ago, James Woolman, author of Time and How to Spend It, wrote an article in, ironically, Time magazine that a growing awareness of consumerism's effects on the environment and a propensity to broadcast our lives on social media have led many of us to prioritize experience over things. And we fear of misusing time or wasting it on less than satisfying experiences. But, Woolman writes, there's some irony to this predicament. We have more free time now than we have had in decades. But for a number of reasons, it doesn't feel that way. In fact, our lifespans have gotten a bit longer, 13% since 1960, and our spending power has surged by 198%. But we're finding it harder and harder to stuff all the things that we want and can afford into the time we have. Time that we worry is becoming more and more limited because of the many expectations and demands made on us or that we make on ourselves. And then there's our cell phone addiction. Woolman writes, American adults spend around 3.5 hours on their devices every day, trying to keep up with the volume of emails, texts, social media updates, and 24/7 news. And much of our time is contaminated time, when we're doing one thing, but thinking about something else, trying to get more miles out of every minute, scanning Twitter, or whatever it's called now, while watching television, for example, makes us think we're being productive, but really, it just makes us feel more frazzled. Add to this the ever-expanding options in today's experience economy. Think of all the pop-ups, plays, talks, workshops, and escape rooms you could go to tonight. No wonder many of us suffer from what psychologists call time fatigue. People who feel strapped for time are more likely to be anxious or depressed. They are less likely to exercise or eat healthy foods, and they're less productive at work. As an advertisement for a cruise line company puts it, time is our least renewable resource. Despite the stress our fixation on it may cause, it's good for us to consider if we're using it wisely. So maybe we should take a look at the net of our calendars and e-journals to reflect on how we use our time. Are we spending the gift of this time God has given us for what is good and enriching and affirming? And are we able to throw away those demands and expectations that make our lives less than what we want them to be? That doesn't mean we can eliminate everything that is unpleasant in our lives. We can't, nor should we, avoid sacrifice and suffering for the sake of others or for what is good. Jesus urges us to stop and look at our time as if it were a net of so many experiences and recognize what those experiences teach, what we have learned from the time we have been given, and how we might use our days to make God's kingdom of justice, peace, and mercy a reality in our lives. Seeds, weeds, yeast, treasures, pearls, dragnets. All these images of the kingdom of God given to us by Jesus these last 3 Sundays. Have any of them spoken to me? Am I open to working with the Spirit of Jesus to make the kingdom even a tiny bit more real? Thanks for listening.